Karen, I just wanted to get started and say, and I mentioned to you this earlier, I last year invested in a property in northern New South Wales with the vision that I was going to somehow work remotely, in this global industry that we're in. And as you can see, I'm right here. The house sits empty. It's certainly burning a giant hole in my pocket. What a lot of people might not know about you is that you moved to Coffs Harbour when you were 7 years old.
Yeah, I did, correct.
What I find extraordinary about that is you still reside in Coffs Harbour, and by and large, much of your life through your extraordinary career, which I'm sure most people are familiar with, you have managed to remain in Coffs Harbour. I'm curious to know how do you manage to achieve that?
Yeah, so all my career, all my life, besides about 10 years, when I lived in Sydney, I've lived in Coffs, and it was really interesting one day. My husband and I were working our guts out. As you know, when you're in the rat race, when I lived in Sydney, you get to Saturday and you're all passed out on the lounge, and you've got young kids, and you just go, "What is life? Like, really? We're just asleep all the time and passed out." And our kids talk to us, and we go, "Shut up! We're trying to sleep. This isn't fun." So, we sat there and we went, there's got to be more to life than this. It's got to be better than, it's great. We're getting a lot of money. This is fantastic, but we're not living. So we said, we're going to move to Coffs. His family's there, my family's there.
Are you both working at this point that you decided to do this?
Yeah, we are. He's in the construction industry. I'm
career.
at Vodafone. Yeah, anyone who's ever been in the construction industry knows that it's just hellish hours. He was actually working Saturdays and only get Sundays off. And we just decided that we're going to move. And I walked into work to resign. And my boss just said, "Why are you resigning?" I said, "Because I don't want to live in Sydney." And he said, "Well, why don't you try just coming down a couple of days a week and let's play it by ear." And that's kind of how it started. So all through my Google career, all through my Twitter career, I've lived in Coffs, worked in Sydney. And, how does that work? A couple of ways. I've got a massively supportive husband who went, "You know what, I'm going to be the primary caretaker." So I didn't, he did all the schooling and everything like that. We wanted the kids to grow up where their cousins were. My husband's one of 9, so there's can I say this shitload of kids there? A shitload of family there. And we just made it work. And I just get in a routine. On a Monday morning, I'd get on a plane, go to Sydney. Best case scenario, I'd come home on a Thursday night and work from home on Fridays. Because I had a lot of regional stakeholders and relationships, I basically spend all day Friday doing regional calls in Singapore. And you think about it today and you go, with technology, what's stopping you, really? It's just a mind state. It's just I'm very, very organised. All my face-to-face stuff happens Monday to Thursday. And Friday, I'm in, my pyjamas sometimes. Shh, don't tell anyone. And just chilling, yeah.
So people might assume, I suppose, given your profile today, I'm sure no doubt going into a negotiation, you can just negotiate that in, and that's what someone in your position can do. What I heard is cast your mind back at Vodafone when it's there. You immediately assumed you were going to have to resign. The flexibility was put there. Do you think that we're moving to a world where it's not just the CEOs, the MDs that can have the bargaining chips or the conversation where they can have a flexible...
Yes. So the way it worked for me is I never had that discussion at Google and I never had it at Twitter. So when I started at Google, I started just doing the 5 days a week. I'd get on a plane on Friday night. That's no one's business where I'm going on the weekend. And I just built the reputation and the work ethic where I built that value up in the business. So if I said, I'm going to be at home on Friday today, it wasn't an issue. It's not something I could walk into and go, "Hey, I need to work from home on Fridays." It's something that I worked really hard to get the permission to do that. And it was up to me, and the responsibility was on me to make it work and be where I needed to be. So sometimes, there would be weeks I wouldn't come home for 2 weeks because that was the reality of the job. There was some day I could do 2 days from home. So it all just was up to me to make sure I was where I needed to be. And I think that takes a special kind of management. It takes a management that trusts people on outcomes, not when you clock into the office. And when I started the Twitter business, everyone was going, "What are the work hours?" And I said, "Don't ask me. You be where you need to be." That's important, yeah.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you. On the flip side, I suppose, particularly with those values, you must have thought a little bit about wanting to provide that level of flexibility to the people that work for you. What's the mindset shift that a manager needs to make if they're going to enable a remote workforce? And I presume trust sits at the heart of it, but what are the practical parts?
Yeah, it's trust. It's being really, really upfront around what's important. So for me, I have team meetings on a Monday afternoon. I need you to be at that team meeting. Here's the face-to-face things that you need to be. If you don't walk into the office until 12 o'clock and you work till 10 o'clock, I actually don't care, as long as I know where you are, how to contact you, and you're where you need to be, and you're at the important things. And for me, everyone talks about 24/7 with technology. Your phones never turn off, and that's a whole other conversation that we can have another day. But to me, it's a two-way street. I expect my staff to take a call at 10 o'clock at night or on 5 o'clock on a Sunday on the weekend. So if they don't want to start till 12 o'clock on a Monday, it's part of the, the reciprocal arrangement that you have. And I think that comes to trust and the reciprocal stuff, yeah.
So I think, we talk about it a lot here. I was brought up in the era of the dialogue around work-life balance. What we try and talk about is why can't we break those two things down? Why do we have to have a perception that work has some kind of negative consequence on what you're doing, but to actually blend those two things up? Maybe much harder, supporting family environments, those sorts of things. To get a little more specific though, I wanted to ask you to cast your mind back to September 2013. You are presumably gainfully employed at Google, and a 7-year-old small company that no one's ever heard of called Twitter decides to land on our shores. You successfully gain, no doubt, perhaps one of the most high-profile, as I think I noted here, maybe the most high-profile startup job in the country. Talk us through what it's like to become MD of a company that perhaps hasn't even developed its own ways of working. What kind of support did you get? What do you do?
So first of all, that was a dance that took 9 months. So those conversations happened in January. So even though I started in September, the process was that long because at that stage, Twitter wasn't even clear around what they wanted to do in Australia and what the footprint was. So the first thing you do is you actually take a jump of a leap of faith. Like, again, this is a new business. You're going from a place like Google, amazing, fantastic company, very established, to something you're not quite sure of. So the first thing for me was making sure that the people that I'm working with are really, really critical for me, and that's who I am. I like to work with really smart, intelligent people. So tick that box, right? I'm gonna do that. Then it's really, really interesting in the startup days because you have what I call bursts of activities. So all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, you've got all this open headcount, go do this, go and hire all these people as fast as you can, and then next week it's, okay, you have no headcount, but your targets have gone up. And it's like, oh my God, there's a great opportunity. So a lot of it is controlling that roller coaster ride that you go through with that relationship of head office when the company's growing, and try and keep some kind of calmness for the people on the ground so that chaos is protected, yeah.
As the protector of the chaos and bringing in those great smart people, but how do you decide the capability that makes up a group of people that runs Twitter?
Yeah.
Are you designing job roles? What are you looking to?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing that I talk to people about this is I can't hide domain expertise. I can't go to the market and go, hey, I need someone who's got 5 years experience selling Twitter. They don't exist. So you actually really have to broaden your way of thinking. So for me, it was a really great opportunity to, one, diversify the workforce really amazingly. And I mean that from different perspectives, different genders, but also to different experiences and backgrounds, because Twitter's very unique. It's got a strong media play, it's got a strong advertising play, it's got a strong social responsibility play. So for me, I always was looking at what is a great person and how do they sit in the team, because that team dynamic's really important. And if they're not adding value to the team, if I'm just replicating what I've already got, that's not a good thing. So I was really fortunate to do a really great diverse workforce that we could do at that stage. With lots of different experience. It would have been really easy for me to go, let me just go poach a lot of Googlers and repeat that. But even though that was easy, I knew that would be the wrong thing to do. But you also have to get people, I laugh, for the first 6 months, I was the one buying photocopy paper. Well, because I was going to people like, that's not your job. Well, not mine either, but guess what? The buck stops here. So it's like, you need those people that hunger.
It was literally like starting a startup.
Oh, calling the internet company and going, why did you cut our internet off? Well, the bill wasn't paid. Then you're going, who the hell pays bills in this company? And again, trying to navigate, you get bounced all around the world trying to figure out who pays the bills because, you're in startup mode. And even though it's more established in the States, out in the Asia-Pacific area, very, very early on in that stage, yeah.
I wanted to move the conversation to something I think, I'd say your professional experience encompassing both Google and YouTube and then later Twitter. And to bring the tone of the conversation to another note, I think arguably, we're witnessing one of the great moral declines in public discourse at the moment, and it seems to be being led from the top, and it happens to be your former organisation that seems to be the platform of choice.
Trump!
I'm really
I'm
curious to
joking.
know, having been both professionally involved as MD of Twitter, as a parent, as a person who's heavily involved in the broader community, what's your view on the uglier side of some of the commentary that goes on? We've seen IMDb is now shutting down its message boards. We recently saw Darcy Vescio, the Carlton female football player, hacked on Twitter. What's your view on what's going on? Is this are things changing?
Yes. So for me, there's a few things that go through my head. First of all, the genie's not going back in the bottle. So sometimes it's really tempting for us to pretend that this isn't happening, and if something will happen, it'll go away. The genie's not going back in the bottle. Technology has a lot of advantages to this world, but it also has a lot of challenges from a social society perspective on how we behave. And as a society, we need to learn on how behaviour needs to change, what's acceptable and what's not. The second thing is that sometimes human nature is just ugly. Like, there's ugly people out there, and a lot of the time we choose who we engage with. If we walk down the street and someone yells at us, we don't engage with them. We just keep walking and things like that. But when you have this level of of distance between a technology distance, but it's still intimate to you, that whole way you interact completely changes. I think as a society in general, we're learning, and we don't know, and we will evolve as it happens. And I think technology companies, even though they have the best of intentions, and they do, they're struggling with it as well. If it's an easy fix, someone would have resolved it. But when you're battling with something like, how do we deliver freedom of speech? How do we remove all intermediaries? Guess what? When that happens, ugly stuff happens just as much as the good stuff happens. And as that happens, you need to keep changing your rules. One of the great examples I had at Twitter, and this is a horrible example, but it makes the point, is when there was those beheadings, and there was videos out everywhere. As a company, we had to question, at what stage do we cut that video off? Is it before the knife hits the throat? When the knife hits the throat? When it starts to cut? But they're the questions and the challenges that legal departments are facing around, if we show people this stuff, how far do we go? And that's moving all the time. It's happening. Those questions happen every single day.
So I was actually super curious about that. If we look at traditional media, and the media barons, we still have a few around. The ultimate concept that the editor is ultimately in charge, that probably the owner per se, and that there is an ultimate level of accountability that we expect there. And we've seen that through perhaps the decline, some of the stuff that's happened in the UK. To what degree do you feel the leadership of social media organisations, the platforms, and of course they call themselves platforms, are responsible, should be responsible, consider themselves responsible, and what's the debate? And I think you started touching on it to the point here.
I'm not going to get into the legalities of it. I'm not a lawyer, and I wouldn't do that conversation justice. But the conversation is exactly that. It's around, once you start curating, and there's a line that you cross that you become a curator, you become an editor. You become an editor of that we've seen more of the traditional newspapers, and then you take responsibility for that content. The way a lot of these platforms see themselves is we're providing a platform for society to reflect itself. As part of that, as I've mentioned, you see fantastic stuff, voices, opinions that you've never seen before that add value to conversations. You also see a lot of shit that's just not adding value. So they're grappling with that. A lot of that is around making sure individuals have the tools to control their own experience. But those rules keep getting changed. I can speak on Twitter's behalf that yesterday they did another massive release of all the safety rules because society keeps changing so quickly, and they're trying to keep up, but still keeping the essence of freedom of speech. And with freedom of speech, there has to be two sides. It doesn't work when it's just one side. So it's a big social issue that we have to, as individuals, figure out for ourselves, and businesses and governments have to figure out as well.
I didn't ask you this before, and I don't know, but just out of curiosity, have you yourself ever been the victim of trolling?
I've had some people say not nice stuff to me. Yeah. I'm just a blocker. Like, different people have different rules. I just block. It's like, I'm not going to geek.
Nath, you're out, mate.
Yeah, I'm just like, even if I just don't like what you're saying, I just like, and that's me. For me, it's just like, I just don't want to hear that stuff. If you've got nothing valuable to add, if you're just taking a dig for the sake of it. But primarily, I haven't, so I cannot put myself in the shoes of those people. I've seen some bad situations happen on platforms. I've seen bad situations happen when I was at school. So I think the other thing is there is an upside to this, and I know it's hard to see, is bullying has been around for a very, very long time. People are now talking about it. It's now coming out and people can see it, so we can actually, as a society, deal with it, as opposed to when everyone in this room would have done it when they were at school, being on the receiving end of bullyingness that, you know, I don't even know if that's a word, you know what I mean? Yeah. On that end, and where no one sees it. So, you know, if there's any shining light at the end of the tunnel, it's we're having this conversation. There's a lot of resources going in to help people about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, now, obviously, it's been a couple of months since you've taken a break post Twitter. Looking back, I'm just kind of curious. Twitter as a business is in the media for all the time, and we all use it. And in fact, it's perhaps never more so than right now, as we hang on every word of US leadership. What does the future hold for Twitter? Is it bright, and where do you see it fitting into an increasingly complex landscape?
Yeah, look, this is one of the interesting things when you see all these RIP Twitter, Twitter's dead, it's gone, it's never happening. For me to try and imagine a world that Twitter doesn't exist, I just cannot even fathom that possibility. I think it plays such an important role around giving freedom of speech to just anybody who wants a platform, excluding some of the stuff that we've just talked about. So I think it will always remain. I think there's a love-hate relationship with the media. The media rely on it and use it, and then they hate the fact that they rely on it and use it. So there's some interesting tensions there. But I think it's also, too, it's a company that's forcing us to have some of these conversations. And again, if it wasn't Twitter, there'd be something else doing it, because that's what technology does. Technology's breaking down barriers. It's letting anyone communicate. And who would have ever thought you had a president, regardless of what your political views are, that has actually just bypassed the traditional press completely and just given that, you know, if you're in PR, you're studying that stuff massively now, going, what the hell just happened? Because the media just had the rug pulled out of it completely, and who knows where that's going to go.
It's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. We asked you...
I forgot.
Oh, no. Well, we could talk about it.
No, we can do it. That's fine.
So we asked you, or I'm asking you fresh then. What if you were to nominate 3 things that you would tell your younger self, 1 to 3 or 5, however many you like, that you would tell your younger self, what would you say?
Yeah, I would first say just be bold every day, all the time. I think fear holds us back so much. Just be bold. And again, what's the worst thing that can happen? You just get a bit of a bruised ego, and guess what? The ego is very, very resilient, and it will come back. So be bold, back yourself. The other thing is just don't take life so seriously. Like, enjoy it. Find time to enjoy it. You know, if it doesn't work once, if you go down a path and that hasn't worked, don't worry about it. You know, I looked at my career and I go, oh, I didn't get into the accountancy firms that I was supposed to when I finished university. And I've worked for 3 amazing companies that didn't exist when I started university. So you know what? If I had a career plan, I would never have had the life I've had now. So be bold, take risks, and just enjoy yourself. Like, life's here to be lived.
Brilliant. Well, you certainly set a standard for all of us that says anything's possible. So thank you so much for sharing some of those initial thoughts.